Dad gave my spoiled brother $120,000 for med school but refused to help my business. Now they're begging for money, claiming my brother's life is in danger. Hi, so before I get into what happened, let me tell you a bit about my family so everything makes sense. I'm a 21-year-old guy, 21M, from a broken home. Unfortunately, my parents divorced when I was in middle school because my dad had an affair with his secretary. Of course, I found out about that much later, when I was a little older. But the problems in my parents' marriage had always been there, and even as a child, I had picked up on the tension. They were together, but it was clear they weren't really in love. There was definitely something off. When I saw other parents with their children, I could tell they were a happy family, but that wasn't the case with mine. I also have an older brother. One might think that coming from a broken family would make our relationship stronger, but that's not what happened. No, unfortunately, my brother is a jerk, and for some reason, he always seemed to have it out for me, even when we were kids. He would constantly try to put me down and bully me relentlessly, which caused my parents to take sides. My mom was mostly on my side, while my dad always supported my brother. My brother, Eric, is 25 now, but growing up, he was not a good guy at all. He was the meanest kid ever and never missed an opportunity to pick on me in front of his friends. I was a lot smaller than him, both physically and mentally, so I couldn't do anything except run to my mother. That made me look even worse and earned me the label of a mama's boy. My mother would always reprimand him, but it didn't help because my dad would always take his side and tell my mother that I needed to learn how to play rough, because that's how I would become a real man. But I didn't want to learn how to be a man like that. I just wanted to live in peace. For some reason, my dad and my brother hated the idea of me having a peaceful life. They would constantly try to bother me, one way or another. My mom would try to protect me, but there was only so much she could do. She couldn't keep an eye on us while also doing all the household chores. She was a stay-at-home mom with a lot on her plate, raising us and keeping the house in order. So it was nearly impossible for her to prevent me from being bullied by my brother or my dad. That was how things were when I was growing up. Over time, I learned to accept it and just let it go instead of constantly complaining or fighting against it. Then, when I was in 8th grade, my mom sat me down and told me she was separating from my dad. At that point, I was old enough to understand that they had their reasons, and this was probably for the best. She didn't tell me the exact reason for the divorce, but I assumed it was because my dad was a horrible husband and my mom had had enough. It wasn't until much later, when I was in high school, that I found out the real reason why she left. Apparently, my mother had found text messages on my dad's phone between him and his secretary, and that was the last straw for her. She had been putting up with enough already, but infidelity was something she couldn't accept. We were having a heart-to-heart chat one day, and she told me that the reason my dad never liked me was because he hadn't even wanted a second child. She had refused to give me up and had threatened him with divorce. He was just starting his business at the time, and they were struggling financially. They were already having a hard time paying the bills, and having one child was already expensive. Another child would be difficult to manage, but my mom put her foot down. She told him she wasn't going to give me up and would definitely go through with the pregnancy. They had a babysitter at the time because even though my mom was working before I was born, she suggested that she would continue working and borrow money from her father, my grandpa, until my dad's business took off. They would return everything once they could. But my dad wasn't on board with taking money from his father-in-law. He told my mother that the only way he would agree to a second child was if she quit her job and stayed at home. He expected her to disagree and terminate the pregnancy, but my mom didn't do that. That's when things started falling apart between them. My mother acknowledged that both of them could have handled things better, but the way my dad started resenting me and treating me badly after I was born made her feel terrible. That's why she never tried to reconcile with him. She told me that the fact I had such a terrible childhood was partly her fault, and she apologized to me for it, saying she should have left sooner. But she didn't because she believed it would have a negative impact on us. Unfortunately, staying in the marriage made things worse, and she ultimately had to leave. Part of her still loved my dad, even after everything, but she was disappointed over and over again. The distance between them just kept growing, and he ended up cheating. I love my mom, I really do, but I honestly think she could have been honest with me about a lot of things much earlier. She only told me all of this when I was in my final year of high school, but they got divorced when I was in middle school. Unfortunately, I had to spend every weekend with my dad. My parents worked out a custody arrangement where I spent weekends with my dad and my brother spent weekends with my mom. That worked for me because I hated spending time with my dad and hated my brother even more. So I made it clear in the divorce that I didn't want to be with my dad and brother at the same time because that would be a total nightmare. My mother agreed with me, and she got her lawyer to work out the terms. Even though my dad wasn't happy about it, he thought it was important for me to bond with my brother. I couldn't bond with a monster like him. So thankfully, my mom took my side, and I only had to spend the bare minimum of time with my dad and brother, and I mostly grew up with her. But despite all of this, we would still spend holidays together, and it was always terrible. After the divorce, my brother started dating his secretary, and my mother couldn't stand it. He had the good sense not to bring her around during the holidays, but my mom knew the truth and hated it. The holidays were always tense, but we got through them because my dad wanted it. My mom agreed because she had already put so much distance between herself, my dad, and me. It was the bare minimum she could do, so we could at least pretend to be a family, related by blood. But deep down, none of us really liked each other. Both my brother and I had chosen which parent we liked more, and so had our parents. It was a dysfunctional family, and I had a pretty weird childhood. Life savings. My dad seemed proud of what he had done for my brother, but to me, it felt like a slap in the face. He had given my brother a full $120,000 for medical school, but when I needed help with starting my business, he had nothing for me. It was as though my brother's education mattered more than my future, my dreams, or the risks I was taking. It was clear to me then that my dad had always favored my brother, and I was just an afterthought. The worst part came when my dad started talking about how my brother's life was in danger. Apparently, my brother had gotten involved in some bad business deals, and now he was asking my dad for more money to help him out. My dad called me up, almost begging me to help him help my brother, and made it sound like my brother's life was hanging in the balance. He told me that my brother had no other options, and that if he didn't get the money, something terrible could happen to him. I couldn't believe it. After everything I had been through, after all the years of mistreatment, the constant feeling of being second place, and now knowing my dad had no funds left for me, I was supposed to help my brother who had always treated me terribly and whose reckless actions had put him in this situation in the first place. I tried to keep my cool, but I couldn't hold back anymore. I told my dad exactly what I thought. I reminded him of how he had chosen to fund my brother's med school with nearly all his savings while ignoring the fact that I had my own dreams. Dreams that I was willing to work hard for, but which now seemed impossible to achieve without any support from him. He tried to justify it by saying that my brother's medical career was important and that it was an investment in his future. But I pointed out that medical school was a choice my brother had made, and that he had plenty of opportunities to handle his own problems. I had never asked my dad for such a large sum of money, but I had always hoped he could at least offer me a little help in starting my own business. Instead, he had chosen to lavish my brother with all his support, leaving me to fend for myself. I hung up the phone, my blood boiling. I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy for my brother. And as much as I wanted to help my dad, I knew that my own success and my own future mattered more than anything else right now. I had to do what was best for me. That was when I decided to go all in with my business. I was done waiting for my dad's approval or support. If he didn't see me as worthy of his help, then I would show him that I didn't need him or his money to succeed. It's been a few months since that conversation, and things have only gotten worse between me and my dad. I stopped taking his calls and haven't been to any of the family events that he has tried to organize. I can't help but feel resentment towards him for his treatment of me over the years. It hurts that he values my brother's life more than mine. But I've learned to focus on what I can control, and that's my future. As for my brother, he's still in a mess. He's made some poor choices, and now he's asking for more money from my dad, who is now begging me to chip in to save him. But I'm done. I've seen what happens when you give everything to someone who never appreciates it. I'm not doing that anymore. I've worked hard to make my business a success, and although it's not easy, I'm proud of what we've built. My friends and I are making it work without the money or the help that I thought I needed. It's not about the money anymore. It's about proving to myself that I can succeed on my own terms. So, to my dad, I say, you chose to support my brother, and that's fine. But don't expect me to bail him out now. I'm done playing second fiddle. My future is in my hands, and I'm going to make it happen, even if I have to do it without you.